In the heart of the Appalachian wilderness, Emma Sullivan returns to her childhood cabin after her mother's unexpected death. The weathered structure stands as a silent witness to a past filled with unanswered questions and haunting memories. 20 years ago, Emma fled these mountains, vowing never to return. Now, with only her loyal German shepherd, Scout, by her side, she faces the ghosts she left behind. The cabin remains unchanged. Rustic wooden beams, the familiar creak of floorboards, and her mother's presence lingering in every corner. But beneath the surface lies something her mother had kept hidden for decades. When Scout's persistent pawing reveals a trapdoor beneath an old rug, Emma discovers what her mother never wanted her to find. What secrets did her mother take to the grave? The gravel crunched beneath Emma's tires as she navigated the final bend of the mountain road. 15 years of city living hadn't prepared her for the assault of memories that came with each familiar turn. Her knuckles whitened around the steering wheel as the Sullivan cabin emerged from between the pines, looking smaller than she remembered. Scout whined from the passenger seat, sensing her unease. "It's okay, boy," Emma whispered, reaching to scratch behind his ears. "Just ghosts." The cabin stood in a small clearing, partially reclaimed by nature. Tall grass swayed against weathered logs, and vines crawled up one side of the porch. No neighbors for miles, just as her mother had always preferred. Emma sat in the idling car, remembering the last time she'd seen this place. 23 years old, suitcase in hand, her mother's words still ringing in her ears. "Once you walk away from these mountains, don't you dare come back." They'd both said things they couldn't take back that day, and now Margaret Sullivan was gone. Leaving only this cabin and its secrets behind, Emma killed the engine. Scout pressed his nose against the window, eager to explore. "At least one of us is excited," she muttered. Reaching for the keychain dangling from the ignition, a small wooden charm her father had carved, worn smooth from decades of handling. The first step onto the porch sent a creak echoing through the trees. Emma paused, half expecting her mother to appear in the doorway with that disapproving look she'd perfected. Instead, only silence greeted her as she slid the key into the lock. The door swung open with a groan, releasing the musty scent of neglect. Emma flicked a light switch. Surprisingly, the electricity still worked. The cabin's interior emerged from shadow, a stone fireplace dominating one wall, mismatched furniture arranged around a faded rug, bookshelves overflowing with her mother's collection of local history and plant identification guides. Scout bounded past her, investigating every corner, while Emma stood frozen in the doorway. Her mother's reading glasses still rested on a side table beside an open book. A half-empty cup of tea, long since dried, sat nearby. It was as if Margaret had just stepped out momentarily. Emma moved through the main room, touching objects hesitantly, like a visitor in a museum. Photos hung crooked on the walls. Emma as a child, always serious-faced, never quite smiling. None from after she'd left. The kitchen told the story of her mother's decline. Prescription bottles lined the windowsill, labels faded from sunlight. The refrigerator contained only condiments and a carton of milk long past expiration. Cabinet doors hung slightly open, revealing sparse supplies. "Did anyone check on you?" Emma whispered to the empty room. She continued her exploration, finding her childhood bedroom untouched, a shrine to the daughter who'd abandoned the mountains. Her teenage journal still hidden beneath the loose floorboard. Her collection of pine cones still arranged on the window ledge. By nightfall, Emma had made a half-hearted attempt at cleaning, more to keep busy than from any real desire for order. She sat at the kitchen table with a glass of whiskey she'd found in a cabinet, Scout dozing at her feet. Her mother's journal lay before her, the leather cover worn from constant handling. Emma traced her fingers over the embossed initials. She'd found it in the bedside table, the final volume of many, she assumed. The urge to read it warred with the fear of what she might find. Accusations, resentment, the dying thoughts of a woman who'd lived in isolation for decades. Sleep came fitfully that night, the unfamiliar creaks of the cabin keeping her alert. Scout remained vigilant, occasionally rising to peer out windows or investigate sounds Emma could barely hear. The mountain darkness pressed against the glass, complete in a way city darkness never was. Morning arrived with harsh clarity. Sunlight streamed through dusty windows, illuminating the true state of her mother's final years. What the evening shadows had hidden, daylight exposed. Water stains on the ceiling, mouse droppings in corners, clothing piled for washing that never happened. The systematic breakdown of a fiercely independent woman who'd rather deteriorate alone than ask for help. Emma ran her hand along a bookshelf. Pictures of a life she'd walked away from, gathering dust beneath her fingertips. "I should have come back sooner," she told Scout, who watched her with knowing eyes. Before it was too late, morning light filtered through dusty curtains as Emma tackled the cabin's main room. She'd opened every window, allowing mountain air to replace the stagnant atmosphere. Scout patrolled the perimeter outside, occasionally barking at squirrels that dared venture too close. Emma worked methodically, sorting through her mother's possessions. Most would be donated, though certain items gave her pause. Her father's old flannel shirts still hanging in the closet, photo albums she hadn't known existed, a collection of pressed wildflowers labeled in her mother's precise handwriting. In a basket beside her mother's rocking chair, Emma discovered an unfinished knitting project. The half-completed blanket featured an intricate pattern of mountain peaks, the wooden needles still inserted where her mother had last worked. Emma ran her fingers over the soft yarn, recognizing the design from her childhood bedspread. Her mother had been making it for her, despite everything. A knock at the door startled her. Scout's warning bark followed immediately. "Coming," Emma called, quickly wiping her eyes. The visitor was a burly man in his 60s, standing beside a battered delivery truck. "Morning." "Walter Kingsley," he introduced himself. "Run the general store down in Palmer. Your mama had a standing order for monthly deliveries." Emma vaguely remembered him from childhood, younger then, with a dark beard instead of the white one he now sported. "I heard she passed." "Sorry about that." Walter shifted uncomfortably. "Brought your delivery anyway. Figured you might need supplies." "Thank you," Emma said, stepping aside to let him carry in 2 boxes of groceries. Walter placed them on the kitchen counter. "Your mama became quite the hermit these last few years. Used to come to town regular, then started ordering everything delivered." He glanced around the cabin. "Wouldn't even let me bring the boxes inside. Always met me on the porch, no matter the weather. She was always private," Emma offered, uncomfortable discussing her mother with a near stranger. "That she was." Walter nodded. "Well, list is in the box if you want to continue the service. Paid through the end of the month anyway." After he left, Emma unpacked canned goods, basic toiletries, and surprising amounts of coffee. Her mother had always been strictly a tea drinker. The second box contained medications, more than Emma had realized her mother needed. Throughout the day, Scout developed a peculiar behavior. The German Shepherd kept returning to a specific area of the living room floor, whining and pawing at the large rug that covered most of the hardwood. Emma shooed him away several times before investigating. "What is it, boy?" "Mice." She lifted the corner of the rug but found nothing unusual. Scout immediately nosed the spot again, looking up at her expectantly. "Just smells, Scout. Probably some animal from before." By evening, Emma had organized her mother's medication by the sink. The labels told a story of progressive illness, heart problems, pain management, anti-inflammatories. Her mother had never mentioned any of it during their infrequent, tense phone conversations over the years. She found herself in her mother's bedroom, drawn to the closet where her mother's clothes still hung neatly pressed. Emma ran her hand along the fabrics, remembering her mother always dressed properly, even with no one to see her but the trees and wildlife. At the back of the closet, a wooden trunk contained winter clothing, and beneath several layers, a small box of childhood mementos: Emma's first lost tooth, school artwork, a tiny pair of hiking boots. That night, sleep came reluctantly. Emma lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the mountain darkness. Scout remained restless too, periodically returning to that same spot in the living room before settling briefly at the foot of her bed. In her dreams, Emma was a child again, lost in the dense forest surrounding the cabin. Trees loomed impossibly tall, their canopy blocking the sky. She called for her mother, her voice swallowed by the vastness. The forest floor shifted beneath her feet, opening into a yawning darkness that pulled her downward. Emma jerked awake, heart pounding, sheets twisted around her legs. Morning brought no relief. Emma made coffee from her mother's surprising stockpile, wondering what other unexpected discoveries awaited. Scout continued his strange behavior, now growling at the living room floor. The dog's persistence was beginning to make Emma uneasy. "What is it you think is down there, boy?" she murmured, watching him scratch at the rug for the dozenth time. Nothing but floor underneath. But as she spoke the words, Emma felt a nagging doubt. The cabin had been built by her grandfather, a man her mother rarely discussed. Old mountain homes often had root cellars or storage spaces beneath. Was it possible there was something under the floorboards Scout could sense? "Stop it," she told herself firmly. "You're letting this place get to you already." Still, she found herself eyeing that section of floor with growing curiosity as the day wore on. Emma spent the morning organizing her mother's paperwork. Margaret Sullivan had kept meticulous records, utility bills, property taxes, medical receipts, all filed by year in metal boxes. While sorting through them, Emma noticed something odd. Regular cash withdrawals from an account she hadn't known existed, spanning decades. Large amounts, always on the first of the month, with no indication of their purpose. "What were you up to, Mom?" Emma muttered, setting the bank statements aside. Scout had been pawing at the living room rug all morning with increasing urgency. Finally, Emma decided to humor him. She pushed aside the coffee table and rolled back the large area rug, expecting nothing but dusty floorboards. Instead, she found the outline of what appeared to be a trapdoor, nearly invisible against the surrounding wood. The seams were expertly cut, matching the floorboard's pattern perfectly. Emma might never have noticed it if not for Scout's persistence. "Good boy," she whispered, running her hand along the nearly invisible edge. The dog wagged his tail, watching her expectantly. Emma's fingers found a small indentation at one corner, just large enough to slip in a fingertip. When she pulled, however, nothing happened. Closer inspection revealed tiny nail heads securing the edges. Someone had sealed this door shut recently, judging by the fresh scratches around the nails. "Mom, what were you hiding?" Emma searched for tools, finding a hammer in a kitchen drawer. She worked carefully, extracting each nail without damaging the wood. The final nail gave way, allowing her to lift the corner slightly, revealing an old iron ring pull set into the underside. But when she tried to pull it open completely, something prevented it from lifting more than an inch. She peered through the small opening with her phone's flashlight. A heavy padlock secured the trapdoor from beneath, attached to a metal bracket. Someone had locked it from inside, then climbed out and sealed it shut from above. A puzzling security measure. Who locks something from the inside? Emma wondered aloud. She drove to Palmer, the small town 20 minutes down the mountain. The hardware store was little more than a converted garage filled with dusty inventory, but it had what she needed: bolt cutters. As she paid, the elderly cashier eyed her curiously. "Sullivan girl, aren't you? Margaret's daughter?" "Yes," Emma replied, surprised to be recognized after so many years away. "Sorry about your mother." Stubborn woman, but good-hearted. Kept to herself these last few years, Emma nodded, uncomfortable with the scrutiny. "Did she come to town often?" "Less and less," the man said. "Ned Branson looked in on her sometimes. Neighbor of sorts, though he's a good 2 miles from your place." Emma didn't remember any neighbors. "Ned Branson? Moved up about 10 years ago. Cabin on the North Ridge. Retired military type, keeps to himself mostly. Seemed to have an arrangement with your mother." The information unsettled Emma. Her mother had never mentioned any new neighbors or arrangements. As she loaded the bolt cutters into her car, a pickup truck parked beside her. A lean, weathered man in his 60s emerged, eyeing her with undisguised interest. "You'd be Margaret's girl," he said. "Not a question." "Emma Sullivan," she confirmed, extending her hand cautiously. "Ned Branson." His grip was firm, his assessment thorough. "Sorry about your mother. Kept an eye on her when I could. Thank you," Emma said. "I didn't know she had neighbors." Something flickered across Ned's face. "Your mother valued her privacy. I respected that, checked in when she allowed it." He glanced at the bolt cutters visible through her car window. "Doing some work on the cabin?" "Just cleaning up," Emma lied, suddenly protective of her discovery. Ned nodded, seemingly satisfied. "If you need anything, I'm up on North Ridge. Your mother has my number." The interaction left Emma uneasy. Back at the cabin, she found Scout stationed by the trapdoor, as if guarding it. She knelt beside the opening, bolt cutters ready. Whatever was below, her mother had gone to considerable lengths to conceal it. The padlock was old, but solid. It took all of Emma's strength to snap the shackle. As it gave way, she felt a momentary hesitation. Some secrets were kept for a reason. Before she could reconsider, Scout pushed past her and disappeared down the dark opening. Emma heard the sound of his paws on what must be steps below. "Scout!" she called, aiming her flashlight into the darkness. A steep staircase descended into shadow, and at the bottom, Scout whined impatiently. Emma slowly descended, mindful of the worn wooden steps. The darkness enveloped her, cool and damp compared to the cabin above. At the bottom, her flashlight revealed a space larger than she'd expected, a room roughly 10 by 12 feet, with concrete walls and a packed dirt floor. Scout nosed around the perimeter while Emma tried to make sense of what she was seeing. Metal shelving lined one wall, holding canned goods and supplies. A small desk sat against another wall, its surface bare except for a dusty radio unit. And beside it, a filing cabinet with a broken lock. Emma pulled open the top drawer, finding leather-bound journals stacked inside, dozens of them, spanning decades based on the dates written on their spines. She removed the earliest volume, opening to the first page. The handwriting was unmistakably her mother's, but the words made no sense. Extraction complete. New identity established per program parameters. First contact scheduled for June delivery. Emma's skin prickled. She turned to the next page, then the next, each filled with entries that painted her mother as someone Emma had never known. And tucked between the pages of the journal, a faded photograph caught her attention. It showed her mother, much younger, standing beside a man Emma had never seen before. They were dressed formally, her mother wearing a military-style uniform Emma didn't recognize. Both looked directly at the camera, their expressions serious. The back of the photo bore a single line in her mother's handwriting, "Final day, Virginia Training Facility, 1983, the year before Emma was born." The concrete walls of the hidden room held a chill that seeped through Emma's sweater as she methodically investigated her discovery. The space was meticulously organized. Emergency supplies labeled and dated, technical equipment arranged precisely, and the filing cabinet containing her mother's journals ordered chronologically. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, Scout curled beside her, as she leafed through the earliest journal. Her mother's handwriting was different somehow, more rigid and precise than the flowing script Emma remembered from childhood notes and shopping lists. "Relocation complete," one entry read. "Cabin security measures implemented according to protocol. Radio check successful. Awaiting confirmation of secondary package delivery." Another entry, dated 3 months later. "Secondary package delivered successfully. Handler confirms extraction team disbanded. All traces removed. Will maintain scheduled communication via drop point." Emma's hands trembled as she read entry after entry, each more bewildering than the last. The mother she thought she knew, the reclusive herbalist who taught her to identify plants and track animals, appeared to be someone else entirely, someone with a past deliberately concealed. Against the far wall stood a locked wooden chest intricately carved with geometric patterns. Unlike the utilitarian nature of everything else in the room, this piece seemed personal, almost reverent in its placement. Emma found no key, but the lock was simple, a basic latch mechanism that gave way with gentle pressure from her pocket knife. Inside she found items carefully preserved: a silk scarf in deep burgundy, a small leather pouch containing what appeared to be foreign currency, several passports with her mother's photo but different names, and beneath it all a sealed envelope addressed simply "For Emma, only if necessary." Emma's throat tightened. She turned the envelope over in her hands, uncertain whether to open it. Her mother's definition of necessary might not align with her curiosity. She set it aside for now, continuing to explore. The radio equipment was sophisticated for its age, not the simple ham radio setup she might have expected in a remote cabin, but something more specialized with encryption capabilities. Labels marked in faded ink suggested frequencies and schedules long since abandoned. "What were you involved in, Mom?" Emma whispered, running her fingers over the dust-covered dials. Scout whined, drawing Emma's attention to a small air vent near the floor. The dog's keen senses had detected something, perhaps airflow or scent, that Emma couldn't perceive. She examined the vent, finding it secured with screws that turned easily, suggesting recent access. Behind the vent cover, Emma discovered a waterproof container holding microfilm canisters and a USB drive that looked surprisingly modern compared to the room's other technology. She pocketed these findings, uncertain what they contained, but unwilling to leave them behind. Hours passed as Emma pieced together fragments of her mother's hidden life. The journals revealed a woman constantly vigilant, recording mundane details of visitors to the mountain, tracking patterns of hikers and hunters, noting vehicle descriptions and behaviors that struck her as unusual. Pages contained references to the program and coded messages received via radio. Most disturbing were the entries about Emma herself. Clinical observations of childhood developmental milestones mixed with notes on security awareness training and contingency preparation. Her mother had been systematically training her, Emma realized, not just teaching outdoor skills, but preparing her for something. In notation from Emma's 10th birthday, subject shows aptitude for pattern recognition and spatial awareness. Began basic cipher training through puzzle games. Subject unaware of educational objectives. Emma felt sick. Subject, as if she'd been part of some experiment rather than a daughter. She returned to the journals from around the time she'd left home. The entries became increasingly paranoid, documenting surveillance indicators and security breaches. Her mother had believed they were being watched. One entry, dated just weeks before their final argument, stood out, "Is showing dangerous independence. Questioning training regimen. Security protocols compromised if she maintains current trajectory. Handler advises separation may be safest option for asset protection." Emma stared at the words, a cold realization settling over her. Their explosive argument, her mother's insistence she leave and never return. It hadn't been about college, or Emma's boyfriend, or any of the surface issues they'd fought about. Her mother had deliberately pushed her away. The sound of a vehicle on the gravel driveway above broke Emma's concentration. Scout's ears perked up, a low growl forming in his throat. Emma quickly gathered the journal she'd been reading and the envelope addressed to her, stuffing them into her jacket pockets. She extinguished her flashlight, listening intently to the footsteps crossing the porch overhead. Someone was at the cabin door, knocking with deliberate rhythm. 3 quick taps, pause, 2 taps. Emma froze, recognizing it instantly as the pattern her mother had always used. A childhood signal meaning all clear, but her mother was dead. Emma had fled the cabin, heart pounding after hearing the coded knock. Grabbing only her mother's journal, the mysterious envelope and Scout, she'd slipped out the back door and into the woods. She watched from the tree line as Ned Branson circled the property, methodically checking windows before leaving a note under a rock on the porch. She waited until his truck disappeared down the mountain road before retrieving the note. "Need to talk, important, will return tomorrow morning." No signature necessary now. Driving toward Palmer, Emma's mind raced. Who exactly was her mother? Who was Ned Branson? And what did they know that she didn't? The town library occupied a Victorian building on Palmer's quiet main street. Emma chose it deliberately, a public place where she could research without arousing suspicion. Scout waited patiently in the car, windows cracked. The librarian, a woman in her 60s with silver-rimmed glasses, looked up as Emma entered. Recognition flickered across her face. "Can I help you?" "I'm researching local history," Emma explained, "particularly from the early 1980s. Any specific aspect?" The librarian's tone was professional, but her eyes held a wariness Emma couldn't miss. "My mother moved here around then." "Margaret Sullivan?" The librarian's hands stilled momentarily. "Sullivan, yes. The cabin up on Pine Ridge." She hesitated. "We keep archives of local newspapers on microfiche. They might be helpful." Emma spent hours scrolling through years of small-town news. Birth announcements, zoning disputes, weather events, the mundane tapestry of rural life. She almost missed it. A small item from June 1983 about new residents. "Margaret Sullivan has purchased the old Hartwell property on Pine Ridge. Ms. Sullivan, a widow from Seattle, plans to restore the cabin and establish residence permanently." Seattle. Her mother had never mentioned living in Seattle. Emma dug deeper, finding a photograph from a harvest festival later that year. In the background, barely noticeable, stood her mother, younger, hair darker, watching the crowd with what Emma now recognized as calculated vigilance rather than social discomfort. "Finding what you need." The librarian appeared beside her, making Emma start. "Yes, thank you. I'm just trying to piece together when my mother arrived here. 1983, the librarian supplied, without consulting any records. She kept to herself, but was knowledgeable about medicinal plants. Helped my father once with a treatment for his arthritis. Did anyone know her before she moved here?" The librarian adjusted her glasses. "Not that I recall. She arrived, bought the cabin with cash, and that was that." She paused. "Your mother was respected, but not everyone understood her choices." Emma sensed there was more. "What choices?" "Raising a child so isolated. Some thought it wasn't right, especially after your father." She trailed off. "After my father died in the logging accident," Emma finished. Something unreadable crossed the librarian's face. "Yes, the accident." She glanced at the clock. "We close in 20 minutes. As Emma gathered her notes, two elderly men entered, stopping abruptly when they saw her. They exchanged glances before the taller one spoke. "Sullivan girl, isn't it?" Spitting image of Margaret at that age. The second man looked less friendly. "Thought you left these mountains for good." "I'm back to settle my mother's affairs," Emma replied, keeping her tone neutral. "Here you're staying at the cabin," the first man said. "Wouldn't do that if I were you. Place has history." "Hush, Frank," his companion muttered. Emma's interest sharpened. "What kind of history?" "Just old mountain talk," Frank backpedaled. "No offense meant." At the general store, Emma found Walter restocking shelves. He greeted her warmly, offering condolences again. "Walter, how long have you known my mother?" He considered. "Since she arrived, I suppose. Summer of 83. Store belonged to my father then. Did she ever mention where she came from before that?" Walter shook his head. "Not one for personal talk, your mother. That she was starting fresh after your father died." He paused. "Though there was talk." "What kind of talk?"
"Well," Walter lowered his voice, "some folks thought it odd how she paid cash for everything.
How she'd sometimes disappear for days without explanation. And there were visitors early on. Men in suits who didn't fit these mountains." Emma's pulse quickened. "Government men?" "Maybe. Never came to town, just to your cabin. Then one day they stopped coming altogether." Walter wiped his hands on his apron. "Your mother changed after that. Became more watchful." As Emma turned to leave, Walter introduced her to an elderly woman examining canned goods. "Mabel Higgins. Known your mother longer than most." The woman's roomy eyes assessed Emma carefully. "So you've come home. Your mother always said you would when the time was right." "The time right for what?" Mabel's smile revealed little. "She arrived under unusual circumstances, your mother. A woman alone in these mountains raised questions. But she earned her place." She leaned closer. "She protected something valuable. Something worth hiding for." "What do you mean?" "Not my story to tell. But if you're staying in that cabin, you'd best be careful about who knows it." Mabel patted Emma's hand. "Some secrets stay buried for good reason." Driving back up the mountain, Emma noticed a black SUV with tinted windows passing in the opposite direction. The vehicle slowed as it approached, though she couldn't see the driver. In her rearview mirror, she watched it stop and turn around, following at a distance. Scout growled from the passenger seat, sensing her tension. "I know, boy," Emma murmured, pressing the accelerator. "Someone's watching us." Emma managed to lose the black SUV by taking an unmarked logging road that cut through dense forest before reconnecting with the main route. By the time she reached the cabin, darkness had fallen. She checked the property carefully before entering, finding no sign of Ned Branson's return or any other visitors. Inside, Emma secured every window and door, drawing curtains and positioning Scout near the front entrance. She needed answers, and her mother's journals seemed the only reliable source. Settling at the kitchen table with a pot of strong coffee, she began reading systematically. Starting with the earliest volume from 1983, the first entry was dated May 15th, Extraction Successful. New identity package complete and documented as Margaret Sullivan, widow. Cover story established with appropriate background materials. Handler confirms no pursuit indicators at this time. Beginning adaptation to rural setting per protocol. Emma's skin prickled. Extraction. Handler. Protocol. The clinical terminology clashed with everything. She thought she knew about her. Mother. June 3. Cabin security measures installed. Communication equipment tested on schedule. First dead drop confirmed for June 10th. Local integration proceeding cautiously. Identified potential allies and surveillance risks in town. Mountain terrain provides excellent natural security advantages. June 10th. Dead drop successful. Package contained 3 months operational funds and updated contact protocols. No sign of surveillance. Monthly radio check scheduled for tonight at 0200. Living off-grid is challenging but consistent with cover identity. Emma paused, trying to process what she was reading. Her mother hadn't been a grieving widow seeking solitude, but someone in hiding, someone with handlers and protocols, someone being pursued. As Emma progressed through the journal, a picture emerged of her mother meticulously building a new identity. She documented learning plant identification and herbal medicine to support her cover story. She mapped escape routes through the mountains and established caches of emergency supplies. August 17th. Received confirmation that Jay remains secure in secondary location. No contact permitted for minimum of 2 years. Difficult to accept but necessary for security integrity of both packages. Jay. Could that be her father? Emma had been told he died before she was born. Was that another lie? October 30th. Handler reports clean status. Program officially designated dormant. Primary objectives achieved. All assets secure. Maintaining cover identity indefinitely. Winter approaching. Good excuse for limited town contact. The clinical tone changed subtly in later entries. Her mother described mountain beauty, quiet moments of peace, small pleasures of self-sufficiency. The writing became less regimented, more personal. December 25th. First Christmas alone in years. Strange not to observe it with traditional protocols. Made pine wreath as locals do. Unexpected emotion when seeing old photograph of Jay missing previous life more than security training recommends. Emma found herself tearing up, imagining her mother alone in this cabin during that first winter, hiding from something frightening enough to abandon her entire identity. The second journal began in 1984, with entries growing less frequent but more detailed. By April, the most startling development appeared. April 16th, medical confirmation received. Pregnancy unexpected and creates significant security complications. Handler initially recommended termination for asset safety, refused. Have negotiated compromise. Will maintain isolation. Child to be incorporated into cover identity as daughter of deceased husband. Medical support arranged through trusted contact. This changes everything. Emma's coffee grew cold as she stared at the page. The unexpected pregnancy, the security complication. Her entire existence had been a compromise within some larger operation. Her mother's tone changed dramatically after this revelation. While still vigilant about security, the entries became warmer, focused on preparations for a child. June 28th. Created nursery in East bedroom. Handler arranged delivery of necessities through usual channels. Finding myself talking to the child, explaining the mountains, the trees, the safety we've found here. No, she can't understand, but perhaps someday she will. October 12th. Doctor confirms child is healthy, developing normally. Have begun modifying security protocols for post-birth scenario. Cannot risk hospital delivery. Midwife from neighboring county arranged through handler. Background verified. Emma found herself reading faster, approaching the date of her own birth. Her mother's entries included detailed contingency plans, emergency evacuation procedures, incorporating an infant, modified communication schedules, reinforced security measures. January 30th, 1985. Emma Sullivan, born 4:17 a.m. Delivery without complications. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Perfect. Handler notified via emergency protocol. First time I've used that channel in months. They're sending additional supplies and revised documentation to incorporate child into cover identity. She has his eyes. I've decided whatever happens, she will know only peace in these mountains. The program, the reasons we ran, none of that will touch her. My mission now is her protection, her happiness. Everything else is secondary. Tears streamed down Emma's face as she closed the journal, her hands trembling. She opened her mother's coded notebook found in the hidden room, now understanding its purpose. Pages of numbers and letters, communication logs, information passed through channels she couldn't identify. Her mother had been living a double life, and Emma had never suspected. A small noise outside pulled Emma from her thoughts. Scout was instantly alert, ears forward, a low growl building in his throat. Someone was approaching the cabin. Emma quickly gathered the journals and tucked them beneath a loose floorboard in her bedroom, a hiding place from her childhood. Scout maintained his alert stance, hackles raised as headlights swept across the curtained windows. The vehicle engine shut off, followed by the sound of a car door closing. Heavy footsteps crossed the porch. 3 measured knocks followed. Ms. Sullivan, a male voice, unfamiliar. My name is Thomas Reeves. I was a colleague of your mother's. May I speak with you? Emma approached the door cautiously, Scout at her side. It's late, she called through the door. How did you know I was here? Walter from the general store mentioned you'd returned. A pause. I have information about your mother you might want to hear. Emma peered through the peephole. A man in his 50s stood on the porch, trim build, graying hair, wearing a nondescript jacket and jeans. He looked ordinary, but Emma's instincts, honed by her mother's training, sensed calculation in his relaxed posture. What kind of colleague? She asked. The kind that understood her circumstances. His voice lowered. The kind that knows about the room beneath the cabin. Emma's breath caught. She unlatched the door but kept the chain secured, opening it just enough to see him clearly. Scout growled softly. That's a good dog, Reeves remarked, maintaining a respectful distance. German Shepherd, excellent choice. Your mother always appreciated practical breeds. You knew my mother well. We worked together a long time ago. May I come in? This isn't a conversation for doorways. Against her better judgment, Emma released the chain. Scout positioned himself between them as Reeves entered, his eyes sweeping the cabin in what seemed like an automatic assessment. You've been exploring, he observed, glancing toward the living room, where the rug remained displaced from the trapdoor. I found some of my mother's journals, Emma said, watching his reaction carefully. Reeves nodded. I expected you might. Margaret was thorough in her documentation. Old habits. Why are you here, Mr. Reeves? Please, call me Thomas. He remained standing, seeming to understand that sitting would suggest a longer visit than Emma was comfortable with. I'm here because your mother asked me to check on you if you ever returned to the cabin after her passing. I don't believe you, Emma said flatly. My mother never mentioned you. A small smile touched his lips. She wouldn't have. That was part of our agreement. Margaret maintained certain precautions, even after all these years. What exactly was your relationship with my mother? I was her handler initially, later a friend. As much as people in our line of work have friends, the term from the journals, handler. Emma felt a chill. And what line of work was that? Your mother was an intelligence asset with critical information about certain foreign operations. She entered a specialized protection program in 1983. Witness protection, Emma asked. Something like that, though not through conventional channels, more specialized. And my father. Reeves's expression revealed nothing. What has your mother told you about him? That he died before I was born. But that's not true, is it? Reeves studied her carefully. You've been reading the early journals, I see. Answer the question. Your mother was placed in this location with a specific cover story. The details of that arrangement are complicated. Was my father alive when I was born? Is he still alive? I'm not at liberty to discuss certain aspects of the operation. Reeves glanced around the cabin again. Have you found anything unusual since arriving? Besides the hidden room? Emma felt a surge of anger. Why should I tell you anything? You show up in the middle of the night claiming to know my mother, using terms I've only just discovered in her private journals, asking about things I found. For all I know, you're the threat she was hiding from. Scout seemed to agree, his growl deepening. Reeves raised his hand slightly. Your caution is warranted. Your mother trained you well. He reached slowly into his jacket pocket, removing an ID badge in a protective sleeve. This might help. Emma examined it without touching it. The badge showed Reeves's photo alongside her mother's, both younger, with a department name she didn't recognize, and security clearances marked in colored strips. The issue date, 1981. This could be fake, Emma said, though the weathering and aging of the badge seemed authentic. It could be, Reeves acknowledged. But consider this, the recognition sequence at your door earlier. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks. That was the all-clear signal your mother established years ago. Few people would know that pattern. Ned Branson used it yesterday. Something flickered in Reeves's eyes. Branson came here? What did he want? He left a note saying he needed to talk. Seemed to know my mother well. Reeves's posture shifted subtly. Listen carefully, Emma. Your mother maintained her cover for decades for good reason. The information she protected remains sensitive. Certain people would still consider it valuable. What information? The less you know right now, the safer you are. He moved toward the door. I've confirmed you're here, which was my primary objective. I'll be in touch again soon. Until then, I recommend caution with Branson or anyone else showing interest in your mother's affairs. As he stepped onto the porch, Reeves turned back. One more thing. The cabin may have been searched already, but check if your mother left anything specifically for you. She would have anticipated your questions. Before Emma could respond, he was gone, the sound of his car fading down the mountain road. Emma locked the door, her mind racing. When she turned around, she noticed something that sent ice through her veins. Her mother's journals, which she'd hidden beneath the floorboard, were now arranged neatly on the kitchen table. She hadn't put them there. Reeves had searched the cabin while they talked. Dawn found Emma exhausted but alert, having spent the night moving between windows, watching for any sign of return visitors. The journals lay spread across the kitchen table where Reeves had left them, a message in itself. He wanted her to know he could enter silently, find her hiding places, access her mother's secrets. Scout hadn't left her side, sensing her unease. Now, as pink light filtered through the trees, Emma made a decision. If Reeves wanted her to read the journal, she would, but focusing specifically on entries about her father. Her mother had always told her that James Sullivan died in a logging accident before Emma was born. The framed photo on the mantel showed a bearded man in flannel, smiling beside her pregnant mother. But the journals told a different story. Emma found the volume covering late 1985, when she was an infant. The entries were less frequent. Her mother clearly busy with a new baby, but still methodical. November 18th, 1985. Radio confirmation that Jay has been relocated to tertiary location. Security compromise at secondary site necessitated immediate extraction. No contact authorized for a minimum of 5 years. Hendler assures continued safety but cannot provide specifics. Emma will never know her father at this rate, taking daily photos to preserve her changes for him. Should protocol ever allow sharing? Emma's heart ached at the thought of her mother dutifully photographing her baby milestones for a father who might never see them. She continued searching, skipping ahead through volumes until she found entries from 1990, April 30th, 1990. 5-year mark passed. Requested update on Jay's status through authorized channel. Response delayed but finally received. Asset secure. Maintains cover. Contact remains prohibited. Emma asked about her father today. Created story about logging accident as instructed in original protocol. Showed her the photograph created for cover identity. The lie tastes bitter. Emma stared at the familiar photograph on the mantel. A prop then. Not her real father at all. The journals from the mid-1990s showed her mother's growing frustration with the silence regarding Jay, alongside detailed accounts of Emma's childhood, September 3rd, 1995. Emma resembles him more each day. Same analytical approach to problems. Same quiet determination. Hendler says program directors still classify our case as active despite 10 years of separation. Pressed for information about potential reunification. Was told circumstances unchanged. What circumstances? What are they not telling me about his situation? Emma found herself hunting through later volumes with increasing urgency. In the journal from 2002, she found a startling entry. June 12, 2002. Unauthorized communication received today. Coded message through emergency channel unused for 15 years. Authentication sequence confirmed Jay's identity. Message content, still secure, still waiting. He must never know until safe. First confirmation he's alive in 7 years. Violated protocol to respond briefly before closing channel. Program would terminate both our placements if discovered. Some risks worth taking. Emma's hands trembled. Her father had been alive at least until 2002, when she was 17. Her mother had maintained the fiction of his death while secretly communicating with him. In the final journal from the hidden room, dated 2018, Emma found her last clue, March 15, 2018. Medical diagnosis confirmed today. Time limited. Hendler offered extraction to medical facility, but declined. These mountains are home now. Greater concern is contingency for Emma. She deserves the truth, but exposure still creates risk. Separate package prepared with full explanation and contact protocol if she ever returns after my passing. Jay deserves to know his daughter if circumstances finally allow. After all these decades, perhaps the threat has truly passed. Emma frantically searched the cabin for this separate package her mother mentioned. She returned to the wooden chest from the hidden room, examining it more carefully. The ornate carvings weren't merely decorative. They formed a pattern her mother had drawn in Emma's childhood sketchbook years ago, teaching her to trace the lines as a special game. Pressing specific points in the pattern, Emma discovered a false bottom in the chest. Beneath it lay a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside, she found a set of military dog tags, the name and information partially obscured by what appeared to be deliberate damage. Still, she could make out Richards J and a serial number, Richards, not Sullivan. Accompanying the tags was a small leather notebook with coordinates, dates, and coded notations. A single photograph showed a man in military uniform with his face and those of several others blacked out with marker. On the back, written in her mother's hand, Extraction Team, Final Mission 1983. Emma sat back on her heels, trying to process these revelations. Her father wasn't a logger named James Sullivan who died in an accident. He was someone named Richards, military, involved in something classified enough to require decades of hiding. And according to her mother's final journal entry, he might still be alive. She remembered Reeves's parting words, "Check if your mother left anything specifically for you." Had he known about this hidden compartment? Was he helping or manipulating her? Emma studied the coordinates in the leather notebook. They pointed to a location deep in the mountains, about 20 miles from the cabin. A burial site? A meeting point? A cache of information? The sound of tires on gravel snapped her back to the present. Scout barked once in warning. Ned Branson had returned as promised. Emma quickly hid the dog tags and notebook in her pocket before Ned Branson could reach the door. She'd managed to avoid his questions, claiming she was on her way into town and couldn't talk. His eyes had lingered on the disturbed rug over the trapdoor, but he hadn't mentioned it. "I'll come by tomorrow," he'd said, as she ushered him out. "There are things about your mother you should know." Now Emma drove the winding road toward Palmer, Scout in the passenger seat, her mind racing with questions. Everyone seemed to have known her mother better than she did. Instead of going into town, Emma turned onto a narrow gravel path that led to Pine Ridge Cemetery. Her mother was buried there, and supposedly, so was her father, though Emma now knew the grave would be empty. The small mountain graveyard spread across a gentle slope overlooking the valley, ancient oaks casting dappled shadows across weathered headstones. Emma had attended her mother's funeral just weeks earlier, a sparsely attended affair with only a handful of locals paying respects. She found her mother's grave easily, the earth still freshly turned. The modest stone bore only her name, birth and death dates, and the inscription, "At peace in her beloved mountains." Nothing about being a mother, nothing about her secret life. Nearby stood an older stone marked James Sullivan, with a death date 40 years earlier. Emma stared at it, understanding now that it was part of their elaborate cover story, a grave for a man who never existed. "Can I help you?" Emma turned to find an elderly man leaning on a rake, watching her curiously. "A groundskeeper, judging by his work clothes. Just visiting my mother," Emma explained. "Margaret Sullivan." Recognition dawned in his weathered face. "You'll be the daughter, then. Sorry for your loss. Your mama was a good woman, kept to herself mostly. Thank you. I'm also looking at my father's grave." Emma gestured to the headstone. "I never knew him." The old man's expression changed subtly. "Happened before you were born, I recall. Were you working here back then?" "Just started that year." He leaned on his rake. "Strange burial, if you don't mind me saying." Emma's interest sharpened. "Strange how?" He glanced around as if checking for listeners, though they were alone among the graves. "No body viewing, closed casket. Service held at night, which wasn't common. Only your mama and 2 men in suits attending. Did the digging myself." He tapped the ground with his rake. "Lighter than it should have been." "The casket was empty?" Emma asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The old man shrugged. "Not my place to say, but I've buried enough folks to know the weight of death." He stepped closer, examining the headstone. "Notice anything odd about this marker?" Emma knelt, studying the weathered stone. Carved into its base was a sequence of small notches and symbols, easily dismissed as natural wear or decorative elements, but to her newly trained eye, clearly deliberate. "It's a code," she whispered. "Figured it might be. Your mama would visit on the same day every year. Always alone, always at dusk. Would run her fingers over those marks, then leave a single pine cone at the base." He paused. "Others came too." "Others?" "Men, different ones over the years. Well-dressed city types. They'd appear, study the stone, sometimes take photographs of those markings, then leave. Never brought flowers, never showed grief. Just business." Emma tried to process this information. "When was the last time someone like that visited?" 3 months back. Right before your mama took ill. 2 men this time, spent longer than usual. Took soil samples, if you can believe it." Emma felt a chill. "Soil samples? You're sure?" "Watched through binoculars from the caretaker's cottage. He didn't seem apologetic about the surveillance. Something felt off. Been keeping an eye on this plot for decades." Emma stood brushing dirt from her knees. "I'd like to see my father's grave more closely. The actual burial site." The groundskeeper studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Wait here." He returned with a shovel and a small electric lantern. "Cemetery's officially closed for maintenance today," he said, a hint of conspiracy in his voice. "Nobody will bother us." They worked together, Emma digging while the old man kept watch. The soil gave way easily, too easily for a decades-old grave. 3 feet down, her shovel hit something solid. Not the expected sound of a casket, but a metallic clang. Clearing away more dirt revealed not a coffin, but a metal box approximately 2 feet square, with a sophisticated-looking electronic lock that seemed far too modern for a 40-year-old grave. "That ain't standard burial equipment," the groundskeeper muttered. The lock had a keypad with both numbers and letters. Emma's mind raced back to the coded marks on the headstone. She studied them again, tracing the pattern with her fingers, as she'd seen her mother do in the journals. 7 characters, a combination of numbers and letters that matched the keypad configuration. With trembling fingers, Emma entered the sequence, R7J4E3S. The lock clicked open. Inside lay not human remains, but a sealed metal container with biohazard markings, surrounded by preservative material. Attached was a waterproof document sleeve, containing what appeared to be scientific papers and a single handwritten note in unfamiliar handwriting. "If you're reading this, then Margaret is gone, and you've found your way back. Emma, the truth is complicated and dangerous. This evidence was worth our separation, worth protecting you both. Not safe to explain here. Go to the coordinates Margaret knows. I'll be waiting. J, the date on the note 3 months ago. What is all this?" The groundskeeper asked, peering into the hole. Emma carefully sealed the box. "A message," she said quietly. "From a ghost." Emma raced back to the cabin, the sealed container secured in her backpack. The groundskeeper had helped her refill the hole, promising discretion. "Your mama kept secrets for good reason, I expect," he'd said. Folks round here respected that. As she rounded the final bend in the road, Emma immediately sensed something wrong. No visible disturbance, but Scout's sudden alertness confirmed her instincts. She drove past without slowing, catching a glimpse of an unfamiliar vehicle partially hidden among the trees near her driveway. Someone was watching the cabin. Emma continued down the mountain, mind racing. Her mother had prepared for this, had trained her for this, she now realized. All those childhood games in the woods, how to move silently, how to cover tracks, how to navigate without trails. Not normal mother-daughter activities, but survival skills. At the first unmarked Forest Service road, Emma turned off, driving until the narrow track became impassable. She grabbed the emergency backpack she'd prepared after Reeves's visit. Clothes, water, her mother's journals, the dog tags, and now the container from the grave. "Come on." "Scout," she whispered, locking the car but leaving it visible. A decoy. They moved into the forest, Emma leading them away from any trail, setting a brisk pace until they reached a small stream. They walked in the water for nearly half a mile, a technique her mother had taught her to hide their scent and tracks. Emma's mind flashed back to age 10, her mother demonstrating the same method during what she'd called nature appreciation. Hikes, 2 hours of difficult travel brought them to a place Emma hadn't visited. In 20 years, a small clearing with the remains of an old hunter's cabin long abandoned. Only stone foundations remained. But the location offered what she needed: elevation for visibility, natural camouflage, and a place her mother had once designated as their special spot. "This will work for tonight," she told Scout, who was already investigating the perimeter. Emma checked her phone. No service, as expected, this deep in the mountains. She was effectively invisible, which was precisely the point. She needed time to think, to plan, to understand what she'd discovered. She set up a small camp, using only the minimal equipment that wouldn't be visible from a distance. As darkness fell, Emma retrieved her mother's journals from her backpack, using the dim light of a small pen light to continue reading. The later journals revealed her mother's increasing paranoia in recent years. What had been annual security checks became monthly, then weekly routines. Her mother had documented unusual vehicles on mountain roads, unfamiliar hikers who seemed too interested in her property. Strange clicking on her rarely used phone line. May 4th, 2024, third suspicious vehicle this week. Different from before. Government plates, though they are trying to be discreet. After 40 years, why the renewed interest? Have initiated Protocol 7, daily movement of critical materials, revised communication schedule. Suspect original threat assessment may have been incomplete. Emma found entries detailing elaborate precautions, hiding items in multiple locations, creating decoy documents, establishing new emergency contacts. Her mother, despite her illness, had been systematically preparing for some anticipated security breach. August 17th, 2024. Health deteriorating faster than expected. Must finalize contingency measures. If Emma returns after my passing, she'll need the complete file. Risk of exposure increasing. Jay reports similar surveillance patterns at his location. After decades of silence, why now? What's changed in the program? The final entry, dated just weeks before her mother's death, chilled Emma. September 3rd, 2024. Confirmed breach. Program security compromised at highest levels. Emergency protocol initiated. All assets at risk. Jay has gone dark per contingency plan. If found, evidence must reach Senator Whitmore, only remaining trusted channel. Emma, if you're reading this, trust no one from the program. The emergency radio in the Hollow Oak still works. Use frequency and codes from the red notebook. Your father will respond if he can. Emma sat back, processing this information. Her mother had known her secrets might be discovered, had prepared for Emma's return. But what was this program? What evidence was worth 40 years of hiding? She carefully removed the metal container from her backpack. The biohazard markings were faded but official, with agency codes she didn't recognize. Whatever was inside, her father had deemed it important enough to hide in a fake grave, important enough to separate their family for decades. Emma thought about the coordinates from her father's message. They pointed to a location deep in the national forest, near the state border. Remote, difficult terrain, deliberately chosen for its inaccessibility. From her backpack, she retrieved a small device her mother had kept in the hidden room. A shortwave radio, compact and surprisingly modern despite its worn exterior. It had been concealed inside a hollowed-out book, easy to overlook among her mother's extensive library. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she examined it. If what the journal said was true, this radio might be her only way to contact her father, a man she'd grown up believing was dead. A man who might still be in hiding, waiting for a signal. A sudden sound made Emma freeze. Scout was instantly alert, ears forward, hackles raised. Someone was moving through the forest, heading directly toward their hidden camp. Emma extinguished her light and silently gathered her belongings, motioning for Scout to stay close. Years of mountain childhood had taught her how to move through darkness. She crept behind the stone foundation, positioning herself where she could observe without being seen. The footsteps grew closer, deliberate but cautious. A beam of light swept through the trees, and Emma caught a glimpse of the approaching figure, not the tactical gear she'd feared, but an old flannel jacket. "Walter from the general store. Emma?" he called softly. "It's Walter Kingsley. I know you're here. Your mother showed me this place years ago." Emma remained hidden, skeptical. Walter had been friendly, but everyone in her mother's world now seemed suspect. "I followed your car, then your trail," Walter continued. "Not many would notice, but I grew up tracking these mountains. Your mother trusted me. I was part of her network." "Network?" Emma called back, still concealed. "Local eyes and ears. People who watched for strangers, unusual questions. We protected her for decades without knowing exactly why." Walter lowered his light. "Someone broke into your cabin tonight. Professional job. They took everything from the hidden room." Emma's stomach dropped. All her mother's files, the equipment, everything, gone. She was grateful she'd brought the most critical items with her. "How do I know you're not with them?" she challenged. "Your mother gave me something to hold for you. Said if anything happened to her and if you ever came back and then had to run, I should bring it to you here." Walter slowly reached into his jacket, retrieving a small package wrapped in oilcloth. He set it on a fallen log and stepped back. "I'll go now. My number's inside if you need supplies. Be careful, Emma. Whatever your mother was involved in, it's bigger than our little mountain." Emma waited until Walter's footsteps faded before approaching the package. Inside, she found a prepaid phone, a small roll of cash, and a weathered map with locations marked in what appeared to be invisible ink, only visible when she shined her UV penlight across the surface. Along with these was a note in her mother's handwriting: "Walter can be trusted." No one else. Dawn found Emma still at the abandoned cabin, studying the map. The marked locations formed a network across several states, safe houses, she presumed, or contact points. One location was circled more prominently, the same coordinates from her father's note. With trembling hands, Emma assembled the shortwave radio, checking that its battery still held charge. The red notebook contained detailed instructions, specific frequencies, time windows, and a complex alphanumeric code for transmission. Her mother had scheduled regular windows for communication, midnight and noon, only for 3 minutes each, minimizing detection risk. The next window would open in 4 hours. Emma spent the time planning her route to the coordinates, approximately 2 days' journey through difficult terrain. If someone was watching roads and trails, cross-country would be her only safe option. When noon approached, Emma positioned herself on higher ground for better transmission. She carefully tuned the radio to the specified frequency and transmitted the sequence from the notebook: 964 Alpha Tango 7 Lima. Only static answered her. Emma repeated the sequence, the seconds ticking away in her designated 3-minute window. Just as her time was about to expire, the static cleared briefly. A voice, male, distorted by interference, spoke a single sequence: 773 Delta Echo 2 Sierra. Emma frantically consulted the red notebook, finding the response code and its meaning. Transmission received. Location compromised. Alternative contact required. Her hands shaking, Emma transmitted the acknowledgement code, then waited. After 30 seconds of silence, another broken transmission came through. "Package secure. Confirmation needed." "Package secure," Emma responded, referring to the biohazard container. "Northeast Ridge." "Cabin 3. 2 days." The voice faded in and out. "Come alone. Watch for markers." The transmission ended abruptly as the 3-minute window closed. Emma stared at the silent radio, heart pounding. The voice, could it have been her father? After 39 years, was she about to meet the man she'd thought dead her entire life? She checked the map again. Northeast Ridge contained several small markings, including one labeled C3, presumably Cabin 3. It aligned roughly with the coordinates she already had. Perhaps a mile or two off, Emma repacked her gear, mind racing. Someone had ransacked the hidden room, taking everything. Walter knew about her mother's secrets. Reeves claimed to be her mother's handler. Ned Branson had been watching the cabin. And now, a mysterious voice on the radio was directing her deeper into the wilderness. Who could she truly trust? Her mother's warning echoed in her mind. Trust no one from the program. A decision crystallized. She would go to the Northeast Ridge, but cautiously, watching for surveillance or traps. If this was her father, she needed to meet him, to understand the truth her family had protected for decades. If it wasn't, if this was an elaborate trap, she'd be walking straight into it. Emma studied the map more carefully, noticing nearly invisible markings along certain routes, trailblazes her mother had taught her to recognize as a child. Secret paths through the mountains, away from established trails, perfect for moving undetected. "What do you think, Scout?" she asked, scratching behind his ears. "Ready for a hike?" The German shepherd stood alert, as if sensing the importance of their journey. Emma secured the biohazard container in her backpack, tucked the radio inside her jacket, and took one last look at the abandoned hunter's cabin. Somewhere, 2 days' journey through these mountains. Answers awaited, and possibly her father. She took a compass from her pack, a special one her mother had given her on her 16th birthday, claiming it had been her father's. Only now did Emma notice the small seam along its edge, suggesting a hidden compartment. Carefully prying it open revealed a tightly rolled piece of microfilm. More secrets. More breadcrumbs on this trail her parents had created. Scout suddenly tensed, ears forward. Emma froze, listening. Distant but unmistakable. The sound of vehicles on the Forest Service road below. Someone was coming. The mountain mist clung to the pines as Emma moved silently along the ridgeline, Scout ranging ahead to scout their path. 2 days since fleeing the hunter's cabin, evading the vehicles that had converged there, black SUVs with tinted windows, men in tactical gear spreading out in search formation. She'd watched from a hidden vantage point before slipping away undetected. Now, the northeast ridge loomed before her. Progress had been slow, deliberately so. Emma stuck to game trails and forgotten logging paths, moving primarily at dawn and dusk when shadows provided cover. She'd crossed 2 streams, walked along their beds to mask her scent and footprints, techniques from childhood games that now revealed themselves as calculated survival training. "Mom was preparing me my whole life," she murmured, "to scout as they paused for water. All those camping trips, orientation exercises, memory games. She was training me to run if necessary." Emma had avoided all marked trails and known overlooks, taking the most difficult routes through dense underbrush and rocky terrain. Her muscles ached from the constant climbing, but her mother's voice seemed to echo in her head. "The obvious path is rarely the safest one." As they crested a particularly steep section, Emma recognized a subtle mark carved into a pine trunk, 3 small notches arranged in a triangle. Her mother had shown her these markers decades ago, calling them special places where they'd sometimes left supplies for wildlife. Now Emma understood their true purpose. Trail signs, for those who knew to look for them. The marker corresponded with her UV-marked map. She was on the right path, following a route her mother had established long ago. Memory flickered. Emma at 12. Her mother pointing out these same markings during what she'd called nature appreciation hikes. "Always pay attention to your surroundings, Emma," her mother had said. "Notice what belongs and what doesn't. The difference might save your life someday." At the time, Emma had thought it typical mountain wisdom, her mother's excessive caution born from isolation. Now the lessons revealed their true intent, preparation for this very scenario. By midday, Emma reached a small clearing with a fallen log positioned too conveniently to be natural. Examining it carefully, she found another triangle marking. She dug beneath the log, fingers finding a metal box buried inches below the surface. Inside, waterproof matches, emergency rations, a small first aid kit, and a handwritten note in her mother's writing, dated just 6 months ago. "If you're following this route, remember that sounds travel upward at night. Keep to the valleys after dark. The cabin has been maintained. You may or may not be there. Depend only on yourself." Emma pressed the note to her chest. This message from beyond the grave, both comfort and warning. Her mother had anticipated this journey, had prepared for Emma to make it, even as her own health failed. Scout suddenly froze, ears alert. Emma immediately crouched motionless. The German shepherd's training was proving invaluable. He'd been taught to alert without barking, preserving their stealth. A minute later she heard it too, movement through the underbrush, deliberate but trying to be quiet. Not an animal, someone following their trail. Emma retreated silently, using a technique her mother called ghost walking, placing each foot carefully, testing weight before committing, avoiding branches and leaves. She circled around, finding a position that allowed her to observe the trail behind them. 20 minutes later, a figure emerged. Male, middle-aged, dressed in hiking gear that looked too new, too clean for serious backcountry travel. He moved with precision, but lacked the woodcraft to spot the subtle signs that would identify him as experienced in these mountains. Most telling was the compact device in his hand, not a GPS, but something more sophisticated that he consulted frequently. A tracker, professional but not specialized for wilderness pursuit. Emma waited until he passed before moving again, now taking extreme measures to eliminate her trail, brushing away footprints, avoiding soft ground, using Scout's lighter weight to test passages first. As daylight waned, she diverted from her planned route, setting false trails before doubling back. She found a rocky outcropping that allowed movement without leaving prints, following it for nearly a mile before dropping back to her original heading. Near dusk, Emma spotted another trail marker, this one different, a small cairn of stones arranged in a specific pattern. According to her map, she was close to the cabin. But with someone on her trail, approaching directly would be dangerous. She found a protected hollow beneath a rock overhang and set up a minimal camp. No fire. Cold rations only, a space barely large enough for her and Scout. From this vantage, she could observe the likely location of the cabin through her compact binoculars. As full darkness settled, Emma saw what she was looking for. A brief flash of light from a structure nestled among the trees, approximately half a mile distant. Someone was there, using light sparingly, just enough to signal a watcher who knew what to look for. Emma studied the terrain between her position and the cabin, planning her approach for first light. The tracker was still out there somewhere, possibly with others. She would need to be extremely cautious. Opening her compass again, Emma examined the microfilm using her penlight. It contained names, dates, and locations, a list of some kind, with certain entries highlighted. She recognized none of the names, but the pattern was clear. Some kind of operation spanning decades. Was this what her parents had been hiding? A list worth 40 years of separation and secrecy? Scout nuzzled her hand, sensing her unease. "Tomorrow we get answers," she whispered, stroking his fur. "One way or another." From her elevated position, Emma suddenly spotted movement on the ridge opposite. A brief flash of light, quickly extinguished. Someone else was watching the cabin. She wasn't the only one closing in. Dawn brought heavy mountain fog, perfect cover for Emma's plan. Instead of continuing toward the cabin, she doubled back along her trail from yesterday, moving in near silence. Scout understood their purpose, staying close without needing commands. If someone was following her, they would expect her to move forward toward the cabin. Instead, she would become the hunter. Emma set her trap at a narrow passage between two rock formations, a natural choke point any tracker would need to navigate. She positioned herself above, in a cluster of boulders that provided both concealment and multiple escape routes if needed. Scout lay beside her, alert but calm. They waited. 2 hours passed before Emma's patience was rewarded. The tracker she'd spotted yesterday approached cautiously, following her deliberately visible trail from the previous day. He moved methodically, stopping frequently to examine the ground, occasionally speaking softly into what appeared to be a communications device concealed in his jacket, not working alone. Then, when he reached the narrowest point of the passage, Emma made her move. She used a small stone, tossing it to create a sound behind him. As he turned, she descended from her position, silent and fast. "Don't move," she commanded, her mother's hunting knife steady in her hand. "Hands where I can see them." The man froze, slowly raising his hands. "Emma Sullivan," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. Or should I say Emma Richards? Emma kept the knife pointed at him. "Who are you? Why are you following me?" "My name is Daniel Harrison. I worked with your mother and father in the program." "The program," Emma repeated. "What program exactly?" Harrison's weathered face showed no fear, only a wary respect. "May I reach into my pocket slowly? I have identification." Emma nodded once, knife still ready. Harrison produced a worn leather credential case. Inside was an ID badge, similar to the one Reeves had shown her, but much older, its electronic components clearly obsolete. "Department of Special Operations Research Division," Emma read aloud. "This doesn't tell me anything. It was a joint intelligence operation formed in the late 70s, Harrison explained. Your parents were key assets. Scientists, not field operatives, until circumstances forced them to become both. Why are you following me? To protect you, or to stop you, depending on what you intend to do with what your mother left you." Emma studied him carefully. He appeared to be in his 60s, with the lean build and assessing gaze of someone who had spent a lifetime in sensitive operations. "If you wanted to stop me, you would have brought a team," Emma reasoned. A hint of respect showed in Harrison's eyes. "Your mother trained you well." "Yes, I could have brought a tactical team. I chose not to." "Why?" "Because after 40 years, I want the truth to come out as much as you do." He glanced around the forest. "But we shouldn't talk here. Others are searching these mountains, people who don't share my perspective." "The men in the black SUVs," Emma said. Harrison nodded. A private security team hired by individuals with connections to the original program. They've been monitoring your mother for years, waiting for her to make contact with your father. Is he alive? Is he at that cabin? I don't know, Harrison admitted. Communications have been compromised, but I know he was alive 3 months ago. He reached out to me when your mother's health declined rapidly. Emma, process this information, knife still steady. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. Trust no one, including me. That would be my advice. Harrison's gaze was direct. But I can tell you that when they raided your cabin, they didn't find what they were looking for. They don't know about the gravesite, and they're very interested in finding whatever your mother hid there. Emma's surprise must have shown, because Harrison nodded. Yes, I've been watching you since you arrived in Palmer. I saw you at the cemetery. I know you have the container. What's in it? Evidence. Data that proves authorized human testing of an experimental bioweapon on unwitting subjects in the late 70s. Your parents were research scientists on the project. When they discovered the unauthorized testing, they preserved the evidence, then disappeared into a specialized protection program. Emma lowered the knife slightly. If that's true, why not take the evidence public? Why hide for 40 years? They tried. 3 members of their research team died in accidents within weeks. The program directors buried everything, created a new narrative. Your parents were given a choice: disappear with the evidence or face elimination. Why come forward now? Your mother was dying. She knew once she was gone, you would be vulnerable. The original program directors are now powerful people with much to lose if the truth emerges. She activated old protocols, trying to create a path for you and your father to reconnect and finally release the evidence. Emma studied the man before her, looking for deception. You've had decades to find my father if you wanted to. Why help now? Harrison's expression hardened. Because I've spent 40 years watching the men who authorized those tests rise to positions of enormous power. Men who sacrificed innocent lives and faced no consequences. Men now positioned to repeat those same crimes on a larger scale. He met her gaze directly. I was junior security personnel when your parents fled. I helped facilitate their extraction against orders. I've been living under my own version of cover ever since. Emma made her decision. If you're tracking me, so are others. How did they find me? Harrison reached slowly into his jacket pocket, extracting a small electronic device. Tracker planted on your vehicle before you abandoned it. Sophisticated government grade. He handed it to Emma. They've likely placed similar devices in your mother's cabin, which is why I've been trying to intercept you before you reached your destination. Emma examined the tracker, smaller than a matchbook, easily concealed beneath a car. How do I know you won't lead them to me? You don't. Harrison's answer was simple. But I can help you reach the cabin through a route they're not monitoring. After that, what you do with the evidence is your choice. I've carried this secret long enough. Scout had remained vigilant throughout the conversation, but his posture had gradually relaxed, a good sign, given the dog's uncanny ability to sense threats. What about Reeves? Branson? Emma asked. Reeves works for the people searching for you. Branson? Harrison hesitated. Branson's loyalties are complicated. He was part of your father's security detail originally. His presence near your mother's cabin wasn't coincidental. Emma made her decision. Show me this route to the cabin. But Scout and I will follow at a distance. Any sign you're leading us into a trap? Harrison nodded. I understand. He glanced at the sky. We should move now. The security team has thermal imaging equipment. They'll be most active after dark. Harrison led Emma through a network of ravines and rocky outcroppings invisible from aerial surveillance. They traveled in silence, communicating only through hand signals Harrison claimed were established by her father decades ago. The familiarity of these gestures, some identical to those her mother had taught her, lent credibility to his story. By late afternoon, they approached the backside of the ridge where Emma had spotted the cabin. Harrison gestured for her to wait as he scouted ahead, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone long accustomed to covert movement. Clear, he whispered upon returning. But we won't approach directly. There's another structure, a root cellar about 50 yards from the main cabin. We go there first. The root cellar turned out to be more sophisticated than its rustic exterior suggested. Harrison moved a hidden lever, revealing a reinforced door behind what appeared to be a simple storage rack. Inside, to Emma's surprise, they found an elderly woman seated calmly at a small table, a revolver resting beside her hand. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, her posture military straight despite her evident age. "Harrison," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "And the Richards girl, finally." Scout growled softly, but Emma quieted him with a touch. "Dr. Eleanor Vance," Harrison introduced her. "Your mother's handler and protector for 40 years. "Handler sounds so formal," the woman corrected. "I prefer to think of myself as Margaret's guardian angel. Please sit." "We don't have much time," Emma remained standing. "Where is my father?" "Not here," Eleanor replied bluntly. "Not yet." Security considerations necessitated a change in the rendezvous plan when we detected surveillance teams entering the area. She studied Emma with penetrating eyes. "You have your father's analytical gaze. And you carry yourself like your mother, cautious but decisive. You knew them both. I recruited them originally for what was supposed to be humanitarian research. Project Eden, developing targeted treatments for pandemic-level pathogens." Eleanor's mouth tightened. What it became was something else entirely. Emma slowly sat across from the elderly woman, sensing the weight of secrets about to be revealed. "Harrison said something about bioweapon testing? An oversimplification, but essentially accurate." Eleanor opened a drawer and withdrew a thick file folder. "Your parents were brilliant research scientists specializing in pathogen modification. They believed they were developing medical countermeasures. In reality, their work was being weaponized and tested by a shadow division without their knowledge." She spread photographs across the table, clinical images of subjects with horrific symptoms, laboratory reports, internal memos with most content redacted. When they discovered the unauthorized testing, your parents gathered evidence and came to me. I was their security liaison, someone they trusted. Eleanor's voice remained steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "I made a choice to help them disappear with the evidence, rather than watch them be eliminated like their colleagues." "You mentioned colleagues died in accidents," Emma said, looking to Harrison. Eleanor nodded. 3 researchers who raised ethical concerns about missing data, all dead within weeks. Car accident, lab explosion, apparent suicide. The message was clear. "So you helped my parents escape," Emma pressed. "Why separate them? Why was I raised believing my father was dead?" "Security protocol. Assets with different knowledge components kept separate to ensure the complete evidence couldn't be compromised in one location." Eleanor's clinical explanation softened. "Your mother argued vehemently against the separation, but ultimately agreed when she learned she was pregnant. Your safety became her priority." Eleanor handed Emma a sealed envelope. "Your mother's original identity, documentation of her life before the program. Margaret Sullivan was a cover identity we created. Your mother was Dr. Elizabeth Richards, leading virologist. Previously with the CDC." Emma opened the envelope with trembling hands, finding a birth certificate, academic credentials, and photographs of a younger version of her mother receiving awards, working in laboratories, standing beside colleagues at conferences. A life erased, replaced with isolation in the mountains. And my father, Dr. James Richards, molecular biologist specializing in genetic modification of viral pathogens. Brilliant mind. Eleanor's expression darkened. When the separation protocol was implemented, James was moved through 17 different locations over 8 years. Eventually, we established him with a new identity, approximately 300 miles from here, close enough that communications could be maintained through our network, far enough to ensure security. All these decades, they could have exposed this evidence, gone public, Emma argued. Why stay hidden so long? They tried indirectly, Harrison interjected. Sent anonymized evidence to journalists twice in the 90s. Both journalists died before publishing. The reach of the people behind this extends into every level of government and private sector. Eleanor nodded. The original program directors now occupy positions of extraordinary influence. Military, intelligence, pharmaceutical development, legislative oversight. Exposure would not only reveal historical crimes, but dismantle current power structures. What changed? Why now? Emma demanded. 2 factors, Eleanor replied. First, your mother's declining health. With her passing, half the security protocol collapsed. Second, intelligence suggests the original bioweapon research has been reactivated under a new classification. History preparing to repeat itself. She looked at Emma intently. Your mother preserved the most damning evidence, kept it separate from what your father maintained. Now that she's gone, you're the only one who can access it. Her final journal entry indicated she'd left instructions for you. The container from the grave, Emma whispered. Eleanor's eyes sharpened. You found it. Good. That contains your father's original samples and research notes documenting the unauthorized modifications made to their work. Combined with the documentation he's preserved, it creates an irrefutable case. Where is he now? Emma asked, her voice catching. In transit to a secure location. Eleanor checked her watch. The protocol your mother established requires us to move you there separately. One final security measure. How do I know this isn't an elaborate trap? Emma challenged. Eleanor smiled thinly. Your mother anticipated that question. She slid a final photograph across the table. Emma's mother holding infant Emma, standing beside a man Emma had never seen before. On the back, in her mother's handwriting, Ellie, if you're showing this to her, tell her the lullaby was his creation, not mine. Emma's breath caught. The lullaby her mother had sung throughout her childhood, a melody Emma had never heard anywhere else. He wrote it the week you were born, Eleanor said softly. Before they were separated. Eleanor moved with surprising agility for her age, leading Emma deeper into the reinforced shelter. What had appeared to be a simple root cellar extended underground into a compact but well-equipped operations center. Computer monitors displayed surveillance feeds from around the perimeter, and communications equipment hummed quietly along one wall. Your father established this location 15 years ago, Eleanor explained. One of several fallback positions we've maintained. The cabin above is just for show, a decoy that appears occupied occasionally to maintain the cover of a reclusive hunter's retreat. Emma took in the sophisticated setup. He's been preparing all this time. For what exactly? For the evidence to finally be released. Harrison had taken position at one of the monitors, scanning the feeds methodically. Your father never abandoned the mission even when it seemed hopeless. Eleanor unlocked a cabinet and withdrew a sealed metallic case. James Richards, your father, maintained the most comprehensive documentation of Project Eden and its subsequent weaponization. While your mother protected the physical evidence and biological samples, your father built the historical record, a chain of evidence that couldn't be dismissed as coincidence or misinterpretation. She placed the case on the table, entering a complex code into its digital lock. For nearly 4 decades, he's tracked the careers of everyone involved in the original program, documented mysterious deaths of potential whistleblowers, mapped the evolution of similar research programs under different classifications and funding streams. The case opened to reveal a sophisticated encrypted hard drive nestled in protective foam. Everything is here, Eleanor continued. Names, dates, locations, internal memos obtained through sources who've since disappeared. Financial transfers linking program directors to pharmaceutical corporations now worth billions. Most importantly, documentation proving the same research has been revived under a new designation. Emma stared at the hard drive. If this evidence is so damning, why hasn't my father released it himself? The complete evidence requires both components, Harrison explained from his position at the monitors. Your father's documentation provides context and pattern. Your mother's samples provide proof of the unauthorized genetic modifications and testing. Together, they establish both the crime and the cover-up, Eleanor added. Separate, each could be discredited or explained away. Emma thought of the biohazard container she'd recovered from her father's empty grave. So everything my mother put me through, the isolation, the training, the secrets, it was all to protect this evidence? And to protect you, Eleanor corrected gently. When your mother discovered her pregnancy, the protection protocol had to be redesigned entirely. You became both the greatest vulnerability and ultimately the contingency plan. If both your parents were compromised, you would be the one person who could still access the evidence. Emma felt a surge of anger. I was a contingency plan? My entire childhood was shaped around this mission. Your mother struggled with that reality every day, Eleanor said, her composure finally cracking. She fought to give you as normal a life as possible within the constraints of our situation. Every security drill disguised as a game, every survival skill taught as outdoor adventure. She tried to prepare you without burdening you with the truth. Until she pushed me away entirely, Emma said bitterly. That was the hardest decision she ever made, Eleanor replied. By the time you were 18, surveillance on your mother had increased. She believed your independence was becoming a liability, that your questions might draw unwanted attention. The argument that drove you away was deliberately engineered to protect you. Emma felt tears threatening. She planned our estrangement? All those years of silence? She maintained surveillance of your life through our network, Harrison interjected, his voice softening. College graduation, job promotions, your brief engagement. She knew all of it, celebrated it privately, asked for photographs when possible. Eleanor reached for a folder and handed it to Emma. Inside were printouts of social media posts, newspaper clippings mentioning Emma's professional achievements, even a grainy photograph of her receiving an award at a company function 3 years earlier. She was always watching over you, even when you thought she'd abandoned you. Emma closed the folder, emotions threatening to overwhelm her. And my father? What was he doing all these years? Building the case piece by piece, Eleanor said. Maintaining his cover as Professor Alan Winters, teaching at a small university, publishing just enough to remain academically credible without drawing attention. Using academic conferences to meet contacts, gather information, verify connections. He specialized in the history of scientific ethics, Harrison added, hiding in plain sight, documenting the very crimes he had witnessed, presenting them as historical case studies. Emma struggled to reconcile this stranger, a university professor, a methodical investigator, with the mythical dead father of her childhood. Where is he now? She asked again. Eleanor exchanged glances with Harrison. When your mother's health declined rapidly, James activated final protocols. He's gone completely off-grid. No digital footprint, no traceable movements. He'll contact us through a secure channel within 48 hours with the rendezvous coordinates. After 40 years, he just disappeared again. Emma couldn't keep the hurt from her voice. To protect the evidence, and you, Eleanor explained. When your mother died, the security apparatus around her cabin was compromised. Surveillance teams moved in immediately. James knew they would track anyone approaching you or the evidence. His disappearance was meant to draw attention away while you recovered what your mother had protected. Eleanor's gaze was steady. He never stopped fighting to make things right, Emma. Never stopped hoping for a day when the truth could come out, when his family could be reunited. Everything he's done, everything both your parents did, was building toward this moment. Harrison suddenly tensed at the monitors. Movement on the north perimeter. 3 individuals, tactical formation. They found us. Eleanor's expression hardened. Sooner than expected. We need to move now. She secured the hard drive in a shockproof case and handed it to Emma. Your father's legacy, combined with what you recovered from the grave, it's everything needed to expose them. Scout growled low, sensing the tension in the room. There's an emergency exit tunnel, Harrison said, already moving toward a concealed door. We need to be gone before they breach the cabin. Emma clutched the case containing her father's life's work. To where? To meet your father, Eleanor said simply. It's time to finish what your parents started 40 years ago. The escape tunnel led through a narrow limestone passage that emerged in a densely wooded ravine nearly a mile from the cabin. Eleanor moved with practiced efficiency despite her age, navigating the difficult terrain without hesitation. Harrison took rear position, periodically checking for signs of pursuit. "We need to separate," he announced once they reached the ravine. "I'll create a diversion, draw them north. You two continue to the extraction point." Eleanor nodded grimly. "Be careful, Daniel. These aren't the same security teams from the old days. These contractors have fewer rules." Harrison's smile was humorless. "So do I after 40 years. He handed Emma a small device. "Emergency beacon. One-time use. Press it only if absolutely necessary." Then he disappeared into the undergrowth, moving with purpose. Eleanor led Emma through a complex route that seemed deliberately designed to defeat tracking, across streams, through dense thickets, over rocky terrain that left minimal signs of passage. Scout kept pace easily, occasionally ranging ahead at Eleanor's quiet command. "Your mother helped design these evasion routes," Eleanor explained during a brief rest. "She had a natural talent for terrain analysis. Your father contributed the counter-surveillance protocols, the patterns of movement that defeat even thermal imaging from drones." "You speak of them like they were operatives," Emma observed. "Not scientists," they adapted. Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "When you're running for your life, you either develop new skills or you don't survive." They were exceptional in everything they attempted. By nightfall, they'd covered nearly 15 miles of difficult mountain terrain. Eleanor led them to a small cave, concealed behind a waterfall, another prepared location with minimal supplies cached inside. "Rest," she instructed. 2 hours only. We move again before dawn." Emma tried to sleep, but found herself staring at the cave ceiling, questions tumbling through her mind. Eleanor seemed to sense her wakefulness. "Ask," the older woman said simply. "You deserve answers. Did they ever regret it?" Emma asked. "Running, separating all of it?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Your mother questioned the separation every day. Not the running, that was necessary, but keeping your father away from you both. She argued for reunification multiple times over the years, but the risk assessment never changed. The surveillance never truly stopped. And my father—" "James," Eleanor hesitated. "Your father channeled his regret into determination. He built an entire parallel life while never abandoning his mission. There were years when communication with your mother was limited to a few coded messages. He kept a journal for you, documenting his thoughts, hoping someday you would read it." This revelation hit Emma hard. "He kept a journal for me?" "He wrote in it nearly every day. Birthdays, holidays, milestones he imagined you reaching. Questions about who you were becoming. He has it with him now." Dawn found them moving again, following a route only Eleanor seemed to know. By mid-morning, they reached a small clearing with a decrepit hunting blind overlooking a valley. "The extraction point," Eleanor explained. "Now we wait." The hours passed slowly. Scout remained vigilant, occasionally alerting to wildlife movements, but showing no signs of human intrusion. By late afternoon, Eleanor checked her watch for the 10th time. "He's late," she murmured, concern evident in her voice. Just as the sun began to set, Scout's ears perked forward. A moment later, Emma heard it too. The faint sound of someone approaching through the underbrush, using the same careful movement techniques Eleanor had demonstrated. Eleanor raised a compact pair of binoculars, scanning the tree line below. Her posture suddenly relaxed. "It's him," she said quietly. A figure emerged from the forest edge, tall, lean, moving with deliberate caution, despite obvious physical fatigue. He paused at the clearing's edge, performing what Emma now recognized as a standard security check of the surroundings. Eleanor made a subtle hand signal. The man returned it, then began climbing toward their position. Emma found herself unable to move as he approached. This stranger was her father, a man she'd believed dead her entire life, a ghost made flesh. His hair was silver now, his face weathered by decades of vigilance. But his eyes, the same penetrating gaze she saw in her own reflection. He stopped several yards away, drinking in the sight of her with naked emotion. "Emma," he said, his voice breaking slightly on her name. "You look so much like her." The moment stretched between them, 40 years of separation distilled into heartbeats. Then Scout broke the tension, moving forward to inspect this new person. James Richards knelt slowly, allowing the dog to approach on its own terms. "Good instincts," he said softly. "Protective. Your mother chose well," Emma found her voice at last. "All my life I thought you were dead." "In many ways I was." He straightened, still maintaining a respectful distance. "James Richards died the day we fled. The man who raised you from afar, watched you graduate through binoculars, sat in the back of your college awards ceremony, drove past your first apartment just to know you were safe. That man has been a ghost. You were there," Emma whispered. "All those times?" "Whenever possible. Whenever the risk assessment allowed it." His eyes held decades of regret. "I have no right to call myself your father. I haven't earned that. But everything I've done, everything your mother and I sacrificed, was to protect you and ensure the truth would eventually come out," Eleanor interrupted gently. "We should move. This location has been active too long." James nodded, shifting back to operational focus with practiced ease. "Transport is arranged. 2 miles east, abandoned fire road." He finally looked directly at Emma. "Do you have it? What your mother protected?" Emma patted her backpack, where the biohazard container was secured. "Yes, and Eleanor gave me your documentation." Something like hope flickered across his weathered features. "Then we have everything. After 40 years, we can finally expose them. The rendezvous location is secure." Eleanor questioned, "As much as anything can be." "Senator Whitmore's chief of staff has arranged a private meeting. The senator chairs the Intelligence Oversight Committee and has a personal interest. His brother was one of the unwitting test subjects." James checked his watch. "We have a 12-hour window before the meeting. If we miss it, this opportunity may not come again." Emma studied this stranger who was her father, noting the same analytical expression, the same deliberate way of speaking that she recognized in herself. Genetics running true despite decades of separation. "After the evidence is delivered," she asked, "what happens then?" James met her gaze steadily. "That would be your decision, Emma. I've completed the mission your mother and I began. What comes after? That's for you to determine." The weight of 40 years hung in his unspoken question. After a lifetime of secrets and separation, would she allow him into her life? 6 weeks after meeting her father, Emma stood at her mother's grave, tracing the simple epitaph with her fingers. The mountain air was crisp with approaching autumn, carrying the scent of pine and distant wood smoke. Scout sat patiently beside her, a constant companion through all that had transpired. "I understand now, Mom," Emma said quietly. "All of it. The Senate Intelligence Committee hearings had been conducted behind closed doors, but their results sent shockwaves through Washington. 3 former program directors had been indicted. Classified documents were being declassified under court order. Senator Whitmore had kept his promise, using his position to ensure the evidence wasn't buried again. Emma had watched from a secure location as her father testified, his voice steady as he detailed decades of cover-ups and the deaths of colleagues who had threatened to expose the illegal testing. The biological samples her mother had preserved provided irrefutable proof of unauthorized genetic modifications, evidence that couldn't be explained away or denied. The small cabin looked different. Now, as Emma approached it, no longer a repository of secrets, but simply a home. Her home if she chose to keep it. The hidden room beneath the floorboards had been emptied, its purpose served. She'd spent days restoring the main living space, removing the subtle security measures that had defined her mother's existence, letting light into corners long kept in shadow. Inside, she found her father at the kitchen table, papers spread before him. James Richards, no longer using his cover identity, looked up as she entered, his expression warming. The initial awkwardness between them had slowly given way to cautious connection over these weeks of working together. "Eleanor called," he said. Harrison has been officially cleared of any involvement. His testimony corroborated everything. Emma nodded, setting her keys on the counter. And Reeves? In custody, cooperating to reduce charges. He was always more mercenary than true believer. James gathered the papers, a lifetime of evidence now being processed through official channels. The protection protocols have been formally terminated. We're free, the word hung between them, weighty with possibility. What will you do? Emma asked, the question that had been circling since their first meeting. James looked around the cabin, his gaze lingering on Margaret's reading chair, the shelves of books, the photographs Emma had begun displaying openly. I've lived as someone else for so long, I'm not sure James Richards exists anymore, beyond the documentation we've provided. You could stay, Emma suggested, the offer surprising them both. At least until you decide. A careful hope crossed his features. I wouldn't want to impose on the life you're building. I think that's what Mom would have wanted, Emma said. For us to have the chance she never got. James nodded, emotion briefly overtaking his customary control. From his pocket, he withdrew a leather-bound journal worn from years of handling. I've been waiting for the right moment to give you this. It's everything I wished I could have said to you growing up. Emma accepted it with trembling hands, opening to a random page. Emma turned 10 today. I imagine her blowing out candles, making a wish. I wonder what she wishes for. Does she ever wish to know her father? Margaret sends coded updates when she can. Emma's doing well in school, showing aptitude for mathematics and natural sciences. Perhaps she'll follow in our footsteps someday, become a researcher. Hopefully in a world more honest than the one we fled. She closed the journal, unable to read more, with tears blurring her vision. Thank you, her father nodded, understanding the magnitude of the exchange. What about you? Will you stay in the mountains? Emma looked out the window at the wilderness that had shaped her childhood. For now, I've taken a leave of absence from my job. There's still so much of Mom's life to sort through. So many things I never understood until now. She would be proud of you, James said quietly. Completing what we started, facing everything with such courage. She trained me well, Emma replied with a sad smile. Later, as evening settled over the mountains, Emma sat on the porch with Scout at her feet and her father in the chair beside her. The silence between them was comfortable now. The weight of secrets finally lifted. A package had arrived that morning. New identity documents prepared by Senator Whitmore's office. Protection of a different sort. New beginnings if they wanted them. After the public phase of the investigation concluded, we could disappear again, James had suggested earlier. Different names, different location. Old habits, but Emma had shaken her head. I'm tired of running, of hiding. Whatever comes next, I want to face it as myself. Now watching the sunset paint the ridgeline in shades of gold and purple, Emma felt her mother's presence in every aspect of these mountains. Not as the fearful, secretive woman who had pushed her away, but as the fierce protector who had sacrificed everything to preserve both evidence and daughter until the right moment arrived. The he, truth, both painful and liberating, had finally emerged from shadow. What would you have done? Emma asked suddenly. If Mom had lived, if you'd been reunited after all this time. James considered the question carefully. Built something new together, I hope. Not trying to recapture what we lost, but honoring the connection that survived despite everything. Emma nodded, understanding. The same challenge lay before her, and this man who was her father by blood, but a stranger by experience. The same opportunity. Scout suddenly raised his head, alert to something in the forest beyond the clearing. A moment later, Eleanor's car appeared on the narrow drive. Returning from her meeting with government officials, finalizing the protection arrangements, the last loose end, James murmured. Emma watched the car approach, considering the path forward. Her mother had lived a life constrained by necessary secrets, had made impossible choices in the face of terrible knowledge. Her father had sacrificed family for mission, personal connection for justice delayed but not abandoned. Now the choice was hers, to remain Emma Sullivan, mountain daughter with a complicated inheritance, or to become someone new, untethered from this history of sacrifice and separation. Either way, She would no longer be defined by secrets. No more running, she said softly, as much to herself as to her father. Whatever comes next, we face it here. James nodded, understanding. As Eleanor approached the porch, he rose to meet her, accepting the envelope she carried, final documentation, a resolution 40 years in the making. Emma remained seated, watching the fading light on the mountains. Her mountains now by choice rather than circumstance. She was her mother's daughter still. But finally, free to chart her own course through these ancient peaks that had sheltered generations of secrets, and now perhaps a future unbound from the past.